Okay, so I never really talked about the Alien series or reviewed any of them, and since I'm jumping right in with the eighth film, let me talk about the series as a whole and my thoughts on them. Essentially, I like to joke that there are only three Alien movies: Alien, Aliens, and Prometheus. I disavow the rest of the films. The first film, Alien, was a damn fine science fiction horror film with a creepy alien stalking the crew of a spaceship. The second film, Aliens, wasn't quite as good as the first one, but was a decently entertaining high-octane action film, now with multiple aliens and lots of guns and shooting. It sounds like the kind of crappy sequel to a horror film where they say, well, we lack imagination and can't make these things scary again, so let's just change genres. But as I said, for what it was worth, Aliens was a decent film. Alien 3 was a dull slog that tried feebly to be more like the original, back to only one alien and no guns, but it made little sense and it wasn't very interesting. Alien Resurrection was a feeble attempt at continuing the franchise. It wasn't dull like Alien 3, but it made up for its lack of dullness by being really stupid. Alien vs. Predator and its sequel, I don't really consider them part of the franchise because they have a different set of characters, they don't expand or explore the mythos very much, and in feeling they're closer to Predator movies than Alien movies. But for what it's worth, the first one was silly and stupid but entertaining, and the second one was hot garbage. Prometheus was a prequel that went in a different direction. Rather than trying to be sci-fi horror movie or a sci-fi action movie, it tried just to be a sci-fi movie, which I think worked well. It was beautifully shot and wonderfully acted, though at times it was disjointed due to poor editing, a very worthy entry in the series. Prometheus was also somewhat polarizing for being confusing. I put that in quotes. While there are confusing movies out there, these days it seems that when someone says a movie is confusing, what they really mean is that it didn't answer all of their questions. I counter that with a movie's job isn't to answer your questions, but to tell a story. And that's everything you need to know. Everything that you need to know about Prometheus is right there in that movie. Movies in general aren't meant to be understood, they're meant to be enjoyed. If you go to Alien Covenant looking for answers about Prometheus, maybe don't bother because you won't find any answers here. Most of my problems with Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and the Predator crossover movies was that those movies had plots, but they weren't really about anything. They didn't have a theme. The first movie is about the unknown, contact with an alien that we don't and perhaps can't understand, and the sheer terror when coming up against something that you could never experience on Earth. Aliens was about survival, the realization that the threat these things pose was huge and the need to fight them because coexistence is impossible. Prometheus was about searching for your origins and leaving the concept of humanity behind in the process. It was a cautionary tale about curiosity. Alien 3 didn't really have a theme. It was just an attempt to harken back to the feel of the first movie. Resurrection didn't have a theme. It was just an attempt to back far away from Alien 3 being boring, but it went too far in the opposite direction and became a Joss Whedon movie. The Predator crossover movies were only about their titles. They were fan service at best, bullshit at worst. So now, finally we can talk about the new movie. Alien Covenant takes place 10 years after Prometheus and the crew of a new ship, the Covenant, which has 2,000 Earth colonists looking for a planet to call home, as many more frozen embryos as well. While the crew and colonists are sleeping, the ship is watched over by a robot named Walter, from the same line of synths as David from the last movie, so he's also played by Michael Fassbender. The ship suddenly is assaulted by a neutrino blast, which severely damages the ship, and Walter wakes up the crew due to this, still 7 years from their target, but the ship's captain is killed in the incident due to a fire in his sleeping pod. The remaining crew rallies behind their new captain, played by Billy Crudup, and as they repair the ship, they get a signal from somewhere nearby and decide to investigate once they realize that they're close by to an Earth-like planet that may fit their needs even more than the planet that they're heading to. They investigate the planet and find the wreck of the Prometheus, but several crew members are exposed to an alien microbe that starts killing them and using their bodies to spawn prototypical versions of the aliens. They're saved by David from Prometheus, who reveals that Dr. Shaw has died, but before she did, she put him back together. The ground crew has suffered heavy losses but can't get back to the ship due to a severe storm which may last for days, and while stuck down there, it's revealed that the work of the engineers has been continued, with the aliens being cultivated and bred to more closely resemble the kind that we're used to seeing from the original films. The missing ingredient was human hosts. Once the xenomorphs start showing up, the movie goes heavier on the action, but in tone it's closer to Alien than Aliens, as there's never a large number of the aliens on screen, and although the crew has guns, they're out of their element and stalked by creatures that they're unfamiliar with. Alien Covenant delivers both on action and scares, but definitely favors the horror side over the action side, which I appreciated. I have to say it feels like a natural progression from Alien, despite the fact that this is both a prequel and 7 movies later in the series. Like Prometheus, Covenant is beautifully shot and wonderfully acted. Fassbender, in particular, kills it again with his portrayals of both synths, Walter and David, and I was impressed by Katherine Waterston as the ship's terraforming expert and Danny McBride as the ship's pilot. Although, like Prometheus, it has some flaws. In this case, it's that the movie continues some of the themes from Prometheus, but at times it can't decide whether it wants to fully commit and go full hog, or continue to be coy. Prometheus had a rather biblical theme, about trying to find our creators and our creators, the engineers, being disappointed in the life that they had created and attempting to destroy it. It was like the book of Genesis with spaceships. Alien Covenant wants to continue and be the book of Exodus with black alien snake creatures. Interestingly enough, this is 3 years after Ridley Scott directed an actual Exodus film. But at times it's very on the nose, and at times it doesn't go far enough. The character of David is clearly inspired by the Pharaoh of biblical mythology, and Captain Orin is supposedly Moses. Early on in the film, he waxes about the difficulties that he faces as a man of faith trying to lead a scientific mission. Not that he's conflicted, but he feels that due to his faith, people don't give him the credibility that he deserves. It's an interesting theme, but it's kind of left hanging when the movie becomes grandiose. If Prometheus was about trying to find the creator, Covenant is about trying to become one, and that's a great theme. It just needed a little bit of fine-tuning. The film's whiz-bang twist ending is projected pretty obviously, but it's kind of necessary to not only set up the inevitable next film, but also continue to tell the story that would eventually lead to the first film's events. Ridley Scott, who directed Alien, Prometheus, and this film, has always been a stylistic director who fills his films with plenty of substance, but not necessarily answers, and I'm very much fine with that. His films are often misunderstood in their time and then appreciated more later, for example Blade Runner, and they usually focus more on themes than narrative, for example Legend. Alien Covenant is a fine entry into his filmography, but it is neither the best nor the worst film that he's directed. I'm proud to now make the joke that there are 4 Alien films. I give Alien Covenant an 8 out of 10.